These things aren't alive. They don't know what life is. They're killers.
Welcome to the Season 2 recap of Lost in Space. A lot has happened this season, so let's dive straight into the subject matter. Following their confrontation, the robot and the SAR crash into the Resolute while still fighting. 7 months later, the Robinsons, Dawn, and their prisoner Smith are stranded on an oceanic planet when Marine and John decide to recharge the Jupiter's batteries using the lightning storms on the planet. Transforming their Jupiter 2 into a sailboat, they start their voyage, but get into a storm. With John getting injured on the deck, Marine is forced to enlist Smith's help, who had told her earlier that she knows how to sail. Smith comes through, guiding them out of the storm and saving their lives, becoming a free-roaming member of the crew once again. Arriving at their destination, the Jupiter heads for a huge waterfall, but luckily for them, they get stuck on the rocky edge. Looking down, they see an unnatural, alien-made metal ring, stretching as far as the eye can see. While cleaning the ship's outer hull, Dawn's leg gets grabbed by kelp that he was removing from the ship. Penny tries to help him, but falls in the water, with Marine jumping after her. They both safely land onto the alien-made ring. Meanwhile, Dawn goes into an anaphylactic shock due to the toxic kelp around his leg, forcing Judy to perform an emergency blood transfusion between him and Smith. John and Will then come up with the idea that to protect Marine and Penny from the incoming lightning, they must drop the chariot to them to act as a Faraday cage. They somewhat successfully execute this plan, and Marine and Penny get in the chariot, which is still attached to the Jupiter 2. The lightning then recharges the ship's batteries and they make it into space, all safe and sound. But they then discover a severed robot arm and quickly lock it up. Picking up the Resolute signal, they plot a course towards it, while a worrying Smith stores the toxic kelp in her book. Arriving at the Resolute, the colony ship is abandoned. While gaining access to a security room to forge a new identity and delete evidence of her activities, Smith initiates the ship's fire emergency protocols, which also separate the Robinsons from each other. Judy then encounters a young girl named Samantha, who tells her that everyone evacuated because of the monsters. Realizing that an alien robot is still on board, John and Marine attract the robot to them and trap it in the engine room. They then all make it to the dining hall, where Judy tells Will that Samantha told her that his robot was on the Resolute, fighting the SAR. It is then that some of the other survivors start docking on the Resolute, including Ben Adler, who tells them that the rest of the survivors are hiding on the Amber planet nearby, and also that the alien robot they encountered is called Scarecrow and has been on the ship the entire time. Ben and Hastings then tell John and Marine that Scarecrow has been flying the Resolute's alien engine all this time, which was taken back by the SAR. Following this news, Marine offers them the alien engine from the Jupiter 2. While Penny has Smith arrested, John becomes trapped in a water well on the Amber planet due to a metal-eating infection eating half his gear and the tools around him. When Ben and Hastings are unsuccessful in forcing Scarecrow to relocate the engine to the Resolute, Will tries communicating with him and gives him his severed arm back, but is unable to convince him to move the engine. But instead of moving the engine, Scarecrow thanks Will by showing him where his robot is, the Amber planet. During her interrogation, Smith has Captain Raditch, who knows she's a serial liar and trickster, go through her book and touch the toxic kelp, leading to him slipping into a coma. In a flashback, it is revealed that Judy's biological father was Grant Kelly, an astronaut working on the Alpha Centauri program, who died before she was born. On the planet, John falls in the well and is impaled by a steel bar, while Marine, Ben and Will head for the planet to find Will's robot. With Captain Raditch disposed of, Smith is set free and fully assumes her new identity as a therapist. While on her way to save her father, Judy's chariot is affected by the metal-eating infection, forcing her to run the rest of the way. She is soon chased by the local velociraptors, but she manages to outrun and outsmart them and delivers her father's much-needed medicine in time, saving his life. On the Resolute, a big problem arises when the floor starts dissolving due to the metal-eating infection. Almost arriving on the planet, Ben tells Marine and Will that this planet also has a metal ring on it, just like the oceanic planet. To save the Resolute, Captain Kamal wants to cut off the infected part of the Resolute that just so happens to contain Penny, Smith, VJ, and Mr. Jackson. But Don convinces her to try to save them via his smuggle tactics. Meanwhile, Marine, Will, and Ben are attacked by the local velociraptors, but saved by the robot, who wants them to follow him. Back on the Resolute, Don is able to save Penny and the rest by having them crammed into an airtight container and picking them up with a Jupiter, while Captain Kamal has the infected part of the ship separated. On the planet, Will quickly realizes that the robot is in fact the Tsar. But before the Tsar can do any harm, he is destroyed by Ben using an electromagnetic field device. Will then goes to the site where he had seen his robot. Once standing there, the ground under him falls away, only for him to be caught by the real robot. In a recent flashback, Ben and Hastings are plotting to capture Will's robot to have him replace Scarecrow and pilot the Resolute. When visiting Captain Kamal, John knows that something is up and together with Smith breaks into the server room to listen to an audio recording of a fleet of robot ships heading their way. However, when leaving the room, he is arrested and Hastings thanks Smith for turning him in. But when John is returned to a Jupiter, he and Smith reveal that his capture was a ruse so that Hastings would confide in Smith. Smith then tells them that Hastings wants to leave for Alpha Centauri as soon as the robot is on board, leaving behind the people on the planet due to a clean water shortage. When Will and his group arrive on the Resolute, John tells Marine everything he has learned. To save everyone, Marine comes up with the idea to retrieve the dire needed ammonium, which can clean their water from the metal-eating virus from another planet nearby. The Robinsons, Dawn, Smith, and their allies plan their mutiny to retrieve the ammonium, with Marine confronting Captain Kamal on the bridge and taking command. In the Jupiter 30, Hastings visits John and Judy and reveals to them that Marine had him change Will's test score to get on board the Resolute and that she had traded her safety access codes for it. Meanwhile, Marine successfully takes the Resolute into the planet's atmosphere, collecting the much-needed ammonium. Using the codes, Hastings threatens to open an airlock that will eventually compromise the oxygen-generating system. When John refuses to have Marine stand down, Hastings makes good on his threat. Marine realizes that only Hastings could have done this. Feeling responsible for the human error part in her plan, she takes a maintenance pod and successfully closes the airlock from the outside, saving everyone. All the while, the robot has been on a mission to rescue a friend, who turns out to be a heavily damaged Scarecrow. The robots Scarecrow, Will, and Penny go into hiding, with the robot communicating that to save Scarecrow, they need to take him to the ring on the Amber planet. With Marine's pod being low on fuel, John takes another pod to rescue her, but is sabotaged by Hastings. However, they inform Judy of their situation just before they drift too far away from the Resolute. After being scolded by John earlier for not helping during the airlock crisis, Smith teams up with Hastings and Ben to locate the Robinsons. To save Scarecrow, Judy and Penny cause a distraction in the chariot, while Will and the robot escape to the Jupiter 2. However, a cunning Ben awaits them there and calls in Hastings and security. Will's robot then desperately asks Ben for help, and Ben switches allegiance, loads Scarecrow on the Jupiter, and together with Will leaves for the Amber planet, leaving behind the robot to be captured. Just as their Jupiter 2 leaves, Marine and John use that opening to sneak on board the Resolute. Once on the planet, Ben sacrifices himself on the metal ring in order to heal Scarecrow. However, along Scarecrow, a dozen other robots come back to life as well. Will and the other survivors board the Jupiter 2 and head for the Resolute, while the Robinsons and Dawn fight their way into the engine room, freeing the robot. Being forced to face the robots on the Resolute, Marine and the crew manage to freeze them, using a giant electromagnetic field. To save the children from the incoming alien fleet, they have the robot move the engine to a transport Jupiter to take them to Alpha Centauri. When Smith then hears that the frozen robots are going to free themselves, she apparently sacrifices herself, but with no sign of her dead body. However, the frozen robots still manage to break free and head for their stolen engine. Scarecrow tries stopping their leader, but he effortlessly throws him away like a rag doll. Realizing there's no stopping them, John and Marine sacrifice and destroy the Resolute, including the robots, their ship, and Scarecrow, to save the children and eventually themselves. Meanwhile, Judy and the children have gone through the rift, and instead of finding the Alpha Centauri colony, they stumble upon a shattered planet and the Fortuna, a ship commanded by Judy's biological father, Grant Kelly, and which was thought lost 20 years ago.
Yeah.